Hey fellas, hope you guys doing great. In today's video we will see, what if Naruto was the Raven's guardian, a wolf demon, and built Harem, Part 1. Huge shout out to hyotonuzumaki for this story. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe and like the video. So let's start the story. Ha ha ha, they're all gone, the young man said as he stood in the center of a barren wasteland. The gravity of the situation had yet to hit him, as he could only stare blankly at the ground around him, the earth ripped asunder. Scorch marks riddled the ground around him, blood laid caked on the ground in the mud. The only thing that gave the place around him some form of life was the large body of water overlooked by two large figures made of stone in the cliffside facing one another, only to be kept apart by a waterfall. He dragged himself towards the large river and took in his appearance. His hair, which was once as bright as the sun, now a deep gray to the point it could be mistaken for a sea of silver as it flowed down his back to his mid-back. Atop his head were two ears that could be identified as lupin of some form. His eyes, which were once a remarkable sapphire blue, now receded to a pale gray/red hue with reptilian slits where his once rounded pupils once resided. His hands and feet were now given an addition, as he had a pair of fierce-looking black claws where his nails once remained. Beneath his eyes were a set of three whisker-like marks that were deep in definition. His clothes destroyed beyond recognition, with only his usual orange and black pants, and his signature black trench coat with the red flames that held the kanji for Rokudaime Hokage on the back, with a large scroll attached to his back with the kanji for belongings of the elemental nations scrawled onto it. Flowing behind him were 10 long wolf tails that swished behind him in a hypnotic tempo that matched the color of his hair. This young man was none other than the Rokudaime Hokage Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. As he took in his appearance, his eyes changed to red and black rings going from the center out. All he could do was think, how did it all go wrong? Flashback. It had been a total of 3 years since the war started, and their numbers were dwindling fast, as were their morale. The kage of their villages had fallen. But not before the Godaime Hokage Tsunade Senju had named him her successor as the Rokudaime Hokage. But it was for naught. Like the other villages, Konoha too was destroyed by the 10 Tails Baijidama alongside the remainder of the allied forces. The man before him laughed maniacally as he said, "What happened to you saying I won't let any more of my precious people die, nine-tailed fox?" Naruto looked up and saw the man before him. No, not a man, a monster in human form. He had long black waist-length spiky hair. His eyes had the EMS in his left eye, while his right contained Pain's Rinnegan eye. He wore a black karate gi underneath red samurai armor, with his signature battle fan attached to his waist by a white cloth. He growled and thought, damn it, I'm running out of chakra and I have no more weapons. Kurama, you got any ideas? He heard a gruff voice in his head reply, can't say I do, kid. Even though you absorbed the other tailed beasts, we are still a fraction of the 10 Tails' original power. While you could beat that bastard Madara, the Jubi is a different being in its entirety. He sighed in desperation and said, but there has to be something. Can't we do the same thing the original Rikudo Sannin did and seal its chakra inside us, and maybe from there you could absorb its strength? I mean, we've damaged the bastard enough to where it can't resist all that much, right? He only had silence as a reply for a few minutes till Kurama said, it's as possible, but with how much chakra that thing has is ridiculous. And you're pushing your chakra coils to its limits. To survive, the 8 other Biju's chakra going into your coils, expanding them, was pushing it as is. If you want to survive that, you would need to change. Again he sighed, but this time in a mixture of confusion and aggravation. So what do you mean by change? Exactly, man. The oversized fox replied, obviously, when I say change I mean you will no longer be human, you will become a full demon. Of what variety? Your guess is as good a guess as mine. But to do this you would need to kill that bastard Madara first and foremost. Naruto nodded and said, I already got a plan set up. If it goes right, I should have enough chakra to do what we need to do to absorb it. How long will the process to turn me into a demon take? You want an estimated time? I would say half hour, 2 hours tops, since you're going to be absorbing me, and the others, including the 10 Tails me, and the others would cease to exist. He nodded and looked onward toward the corrupt Biju and Madara standing atop of his head. He said, You'll pay for this, Madara. For the lives you've taken, the lives you ruined, all for the sake of controlling the tailed beast. I will make you pay for it all. He charged at Madara and Hiraishin towards Madara with a Rasengan towards his chest. When Kyuubi said the transformation process is at 50% completion, your chakra has already begun to change, but your control is slowly beginning to fail, meaning if you want to do this you better hurry up. 68% completion. Madara laughed and blocked with his battle fan and said, "You are a fool to think that you're capable of defeating a god, boy." When he saw Naruto disappear again when he heard a familiar Shinra Tensei, Madara went flying from his perch on top of the Jubi's head. Naruto charged at him again before Madara landed on the ground. Head first appeared in front of him saying, "The only fool I see is a man who is unable to move on from the past and look toward the future. And that is what will lead to your demise today, Madara Uchiha." He formed his newest Rasengan in one hand. The familiar whirling sound of the Rasen Shuriken could be heard. The Rasengan took a black form with a white glow added to its center, while blades of the shuriken took a dark gray hue. He said, "You should be honored, you're the first to experience this new Rasengan firsthand." The blades of wind began to gain sparks of electricity, forming another set of blades on the spinning blades. When they landed, they tore up chunks of earth and dust. When it cleared, Naruto had the new Rasengan still spinning in his hand as he held Madara by the throat as he tried to break free from his grip. Kyuubi said, "Through their connection, 80% completion. By time you end him, you will have enough Yukai to absorb the Jubi and win." And it was good knowing you, Naruto Uzumaki Namake's Rokudame Hokage of Kanagaku no Sado. 93%. Naruto let a tear slid as he thought, and it was good knowing you, Kurama the Kyuubi no Yoko, the greatest of the tailed beasts. He focused and said, "Well, Madara, this is the end for you. This is my newest Rasengan, Fumaraten Rasen Shuriken. I would say it was a pleasure knowing you, but I've never been a very good liar." He gripped Madara's throat harder and tossed him hard into the air and focused some Yukai into the spinning blades, making them glow a ominous black, and threw it at last known Uchiha, causing him to be ripped apart and burned by the corrosive force the blades gave off. Flashback pause. If only I had been stronger in the start of it all, he thought sadly, but steeled himself, shaking off such thoughts. He said, "If I focus on the past, I can never move on to the future. Sai Kurama, having you around for so long makes me feel a little lonely," he thought, looking up towards the sky as he saw a large group of storm clouds roll in. Flashback. Ha ha ha, that still takes a lot out of me. Or it could be due to the fact that my control is once again worth nothing now after all these years. Hee hee. He chuckled. Meanwhile, Kurama just gave a groan that gave off annoyance. He said, "Even now you pull this trash. But if you weren't you, then life wouldn't be of any entertainment." Hee, the transformation process is now at 100% completion. Let me take control and finish this. Naruto nodded and handed control. His eyes changed from the sapphire blue eyes that he's always known turned to a frightening red. He chuckled. "Well, kid, it's been a pleasure fighting with you since the beginning, but now you're free from this curse." He started forming hand signs at a rate that even the Sharingan would be hard-pressed to see. He did a total of 1 and said, "Demonic Fuin, Sadaina Akuma no Kyushu, Grand Demon Absorption." Hundreds of rods clashed with the two high-class demons, connecting the two with one another. Imagine when Naruto was trying to absorb Kyuubi's chakra, when he was trying to use the chakra cloak, when he was pulling the strands towards himself. The two beasts growled with Kurama saying, "Grr! I won't lose. I won't lose to some incomplete abomination." The rods began to change colors while they split down the middle. On the side of the Jubi, the rods turned a violet black, while on Kurama's side the rods turned a reddish orange. Half an hour later, during the power struggle, the sides began to shift on the Jubi's side, finally began to recede as Kurama's energy progressed forward till his energy completely overshadowed the Ten Tails. Slowly the strength and will of the incomplete beast began to fade till there was no longer a trace of the battle of wills, but where Naruto/Kurama stood was a giant black sphere that began to collect cracks of light that formed along its surface when it exploded, leaving the end of the human Naruto and the birth of the Nidain Jubi Naruto. Namake's End. Flashback. As he continued to peer up into the obsidian black sky, rain began to pour, as he thought, "Everyone, are you crying? Is it because of what I've become, or my inability to react faster than I should have?" Unknown to him, a figure began to form behind him till it said, "Would you wish to have a new life, you Jubi?" He flinched as he heard a soft, caring voice behind him. Cautiously, he turned around to face the entity behind him and froze as he saw in all terms a goddess. She had long waist-length black hair whose bangs framed her heart-shaped face. A figure that could only be seen on models. Her eyes were a beautiful gray that not only showed kindness, but also radiated immense power and immediate respect. She wore a midnight black kimono with a red obi and gray rope-like belt that formed a bow at the back. Naruto could feel the power roll off of her, but it was overshadowed by the air of motherly compassion about her. He asked attentively, "Excuse me, ma'am, but who exactly are you? These lands have been absolutely barren since the defeat of Madara. Better question is, how did you know I was the Jirbi?" She giggled and said with a loving smile, "It's rather easy seeing as it's a mother's job to know things about her son." Any thoughts he had or whatever he was going to say came to a total halt as she said that M.O. Mother. He took another look at her, and true to her word, the image of his mother he came across when he fought Kurama overlapped her. He said, "Mom? How are you alive? What exactly are you?" She opened her arms, giving the motherly sign for him to come to her. He slowly made his way to her and embraced her as she said, "Well, my son, you know there are multiple worlds that are a variation of this one. You do know that, right?" He nodded as he said, "Yes, Saraji told me about that when I was little. At first I thought he was making all of that up, but the more he explained it, the more it seemed to make sense. With for every person there was a different world based on their actions and thoughts. But what does that have to do with you, Mom?" She smiled and said, "Well, son, I am the main goddess of all worlds. As such, I've watched over you since you were a little boy. I knew the consequences that you would face due to the actions of your father. He always was one to take the smaller view over the big picture." She said the last part solemnly. He nodded but paused and said, "Wait, you've been watching me since I was a kid? How come I didn't see you?" She gave a sad smile and said, "But I've always been watching you. Every time you were placed into the hospital from the attacks, and you'd spend multiple nights if not weeks there, you'd play with that nice girl with the long black hair girl in the hospital. Or that older blonde woman who would let you stay at her home before the first invasion when you were too far from your home, or it wasn't in any condition to live in." He paused and remembered those two girls and said, "You were Hikaru-chan and Ulne?" She smiled and nodded as she continued, "I've seen how you were so alone and scared, with everyone who would glare at you and harm you. It's child's play to create a body and place my soul into it. I had those two created so you would have some form of happiness in your life." He smiled as he turned to hug her, his tails wagging behind him, showing his happiness as he said, Thank you, Ka-chan." She just held him tighter and said, "Son, I know that you are probably tired from the previous battle, but in another world parallel to this one, there is a powerful demon intending to conquer it. I need you to help protect that planet." He pulled back and said, "If you're the goddess of all worlds, couldn't you, just take care of this demon early?" She shook her head as a reply and said, "With me being the main goddess, it is against the rules set up by the council to directly interfere with the mortals' lives. That's why I couldn't have taken you with me when you were born and had the Kyuubi in you. Much like the other Jinchuriki's parents couldn't interfere with them. You all had a key role to the outcome of this world. Just as you have the key role to the outcome of the other world." She paused and said, "Do you understand?" He nodded and said with his usual grin, "Of course, Ma. You're talking to the Naidame Rikudo Sanin, Naidame Jubi no Okami, and the Rokudame of Kanagakura no Sado. I never go back on my word, that's just who I am." She smiled and said, "I know I can count on you, my son. Before I send you off, I must inform you of all that's going to happen, and I have a few gifts to give you." He nodded as the two sat on the ground with him, noticing that the ground around them is dry, and noticed she placed a barrier around them. She saw this and said, "I thought you might not have wanted to have this conversation standing in the rain." He nodded and proceeded to sit as she mimicked his actions. She sighed and said, "To begin with, the reason of why I'm sending you to this new world is because a powerful demon by the name Trigon is going to attack that world sometime in the future with the assistance of some evil group who wishes to take control of the world. The people destined to stop them failed, with him not only taking over that world but other worlds as well. With your strength assisting them, not only would you stop him, but that evil group in addition." He nodded while groaning as he said, Joy, another take over the world group, you just love torturing me, don't you? She gave a soft giggle and said, It's possible, but I know you can do it. You mastered the Harem, which just so happened to be a bloodline you and your father hold. The only reason why he used the kunai is because the bloodline was incomplete with him but finished itself with you. She outright laughed at his expression and said, The Harem isn't a jutsu but a bloodline? In his notes it said it was a space-time ninjutsu? She shook her head and said, No, it allows them and anyone they are in direct contact with to transport from one location to another either at will or with a marker like your father was capable of. He slumped and said, And just when I thought that I figured it out. Oh well, what are these gifts you were talking about, Mom? She said. Well, I'm giving you the Sharingan including your Rinnegan, which seemed to evolve due to you becoming a god/demon. Of course you must master these eyes before you use them to their fullest potential. And unlike the Sharingan of this world, these don't have the effect of you having to kill someone you love or are close to be able to evolve it or transplant a new set of eyes to get the final form. He nodded while she continued. The second gift is my collected and cataloged knowledge of jutsu, taijutsu, seals, genjutsu, fuinjutsu, and kenjutsu. His eyes grew wide at that, but she pressed on and said, And the others will be given when you reach the new world if you're sure you want to go. He nodded and said, Of course I'm sure. I can't just sit on the sidelines when people's lives are at stake. If I can help people, I will do it within the best of my ability to do so. She nodded and formed a passage to the new world showing a forest area. She said as he started to step through the portal, Also, since you're a high-ranking demon and the only male god in that world, you're going to need a few wives. He tripped as she said before it closed. Make sure to give me plenty of grandbabies to spoil in the future, son. Giggling all the while at his expression before vanishing. With Naruto. Pain. All he felt as he fell through the portal was searing, ever-blinding pain. He felt like his body was dipped in molten lava. His body shrank by how much he didn't know, but he was aware his age dropped by a strong degree. When he landed in the forest area, he only caught the glimpse of one person in the area. A girl no older than 5 with long purple hair that went to the small of her back. Ash-gray skin. And beautiful amethyst eyes. The only thing he could make out was the fact that she wore a purple cloak that was just a shade or two lighter than her hair. In Naruto's eyes she was one word. Beautiful. When he promptly passed out. A few minutes ago in the mystery girl POV. Sigh, another dull day dealing with the monks and my mother at the monastery. Why the people here treat me like a disease I may never know. I walked down the halls of the monastery, out the front door, down the street when something possessed me to look up. When I did, my eyes landed on the woods outside the walls of Citadel. Several thoughts hit me. You should go and see what it is. Oh, it could be something feminine, one thought said. Whatever it is could be dangerous, maybe you shouldn't, another says in the most quiet voice it could muster. Go. I want to see some action, another says with bravado. I don't know, Mommy might be worried, another said with sarcasm following the word mommy. While I agree with the last one, it could be a good idea to see what's wrong. For all we know, someone could be hurt, the last voice said with intellectual tone. I sighed as my emotions seemed to outweigh me and Timid's votes by a fair margin. As I proceed to make a run through the streets, I come closer to see the glow that has yet to die out. My and my other emotions continue to converse between one another through the whole run there on what it could be. Brave said it could be an invader. Me and the others rolled our eyes at the fact that out of all the likely situations, that's the first she jumps to. Timid said it might just be some random occurrence that will die out wisdom, and I felt that it couldn't be any more likely than Brave's. Happy said I don't know, but it could be cool. Everyone sighed at her roundabout way of thinking. Knowledge, being the only sensible one out of the group, said it could be someone who got hurt, and used some form of beacon in hopes of someone finding them. That was a thought everyone had to agree to. But to me, the only thing I could think of was that if this was a person that set off that light, then I hope I can heal them. I can't remember how long I've been running or how far into the forest. I just let the light be my guide as it dimmed when I was going in the wrong way, and brightened when I went in the right. Once I reached the center where the light was, it began to fade till I saw a boy no older than I am, if not a year older. He had long silver hair that went to his hips. On top of his head were a set of ears that could be found on a dog of some kind. He appeared to be alive since when I stepped his ears flicked towards me as if to catch the sound. His clothes were in tatters. He wore a pair of black sweatpants with a pair of 10 wolf tails of the same color of his hair, if not darker, draped over some cylindrical object attached to some rope with a slightly smaller scroll laying on top of it. I couldn't help but blush as I noticed he wasn't wearing a shirt of any kind. It also didn't help when all your emotions, even the negative ones, were commenting on how attractive he was, even rage to my consistent surprise. And his skin was a shock for me since nobody in Azarath had porcelain white skin. I mean, sure, there were people who had gray skin, black skin, hell, even a rare blue or green every now and then. But never white. When our eyes made contact, I was given a chance to see his face. All in all, he had an immaculate appearance. He was lean. His face could easily be mistaken for a young woman's, especially with his hair as long as it is. Long eyelashes included. But his eyes are what hit me the most. They were a far contrast of mine. They were a beautiful gray with a red undertone. On his forehead was a chakra like my own, except it was obsidian stone with a red lining. As the two of us held eye contact, I began to notice that he appeared to be trying to focus his sight on me, but when he did, he whispered a single word that I heard clearly that made me blush beautiful. Not soon after that, he passed out while I stood there with a strong blush on my face. I ran towards him to check his vitals, and it appeared to me that he was hurt rather recently. I rolled him over, but I still couldn't help but blush. I think it was permanently burned onto my face. For a 6-year-old, he had a physique many women older than me would hound him for. But it seemed to add to his immaculate appearance. His whisker marks were framed in sets of 6-3 on each cheek. They were surprisingly thick. His form was lithe and narrow, adding on to his feminine appearance. Her emotions didn't really add as help to the situation. Happy continued to say how handsome and cute he was. Timid and brave and wisdom were going on about him being so well sculpted. Even Rude and Rage were going on about the mysterious wolf boy's appeal. I had to agree with them, which is a shock in my life since I never agree with them, or they never agree with each other. Happy and Wisdom were pestering me to rub his whisker marks. After enough pressure, I caved and gently stroked his whiskers. When I brushed them, I was surprised by 3 things, one being that they aren't scars, they're birthmarks. 2, they felt like they had a soft brush of fur that I couldn't seem to stop even if I wanted to, which I don't. And 3, the biggest thing is he started to purr. Like some kind of animal, but for him it was attractive. But I couldn't help but blush as he leaned into my touch unconsciously as the purring got louder. Rage said, I hate everything and all, but even I find that downright adorable and cute, with a hint of glee which had everyone shocked. Rude added, I for once don't have anything rude or sarcastic to say about this. The purring is just damn knowledge if I had to guess, judging from his appearance, and the energy I'm sensing says he's an Okami, an Azarathian like us, and something else, but it's hard to pinpoint. Raven said, wow, something you don't know. Knowledge, pinch me, I'm dreaming, her thoughts dripping with sarcasm. Knowledge shot back, I only know what you do, smartass. So if you're implying that I'm stupid, then what does that say about you? Only Brave seemed to catch on to the beautiful comment the mysterious boy made and said, am I the only one who caught on to that beautiful comment he made? Everyone froze at that except Happy. Happy, she was bouncing around frantically as she said, yes, that cutie did. And though if anyone else would have said it, we would have ripped their arms off, then beat them with it, but I might not mind if he did. It seems Rage wouldn't mind either. I would have commented until several scars became visible to me, a hole the size of a person's fist just a little above his heart. And several cuts and stab wounds. One of the most visible was one that went from his collarbone down all the way to his left heel. There were more, but those were less visible. Faded with time. The only thing I could think of was how could he get so many scars for someone so young? I began to heal the fresh injuries he had gained when I heard the young man groan. Naruto POV. Ugh, Mom could have told me the transformation would have been painful. Who knows how long I'd been out. I wonder who that pretty girl was earlier. Most likely a figment of my imagination. I tried to sit up, but a voice rang out to me, you should stay still, you're still hurt. At that my eyes snapped wide open as for the second today as I came face to face with the beautiful girl. I thought to myself, ugh, I had to have my father's luck and shy away from girls in the village. though it didn't help when, like my father, I became one of Konoha's most wanted bachelors. I could have sworn I heard a chuckle in my head for a moment, but I'll catalog that for later. After staring at each other for a moment, I asked as politely as possible, where am I? If you don't mind my asking? I didn't want to my first meeting with someone. She stared at me for a moment as if to see if I was joking. It was hard to read her expression since she seemed to lack expression/emotion. Once she realized, she asked me, "You're not from here, are you? I guess I can tell you're in a forest in Azarath." Again I stared at her blankly, which I guess she began to get annoyed with as she groaned and said, "It's a dimension parallel to Earth. Here we use an energy source called chakra where we can use it to heal. Medical ninjutsu." "Pardon?" I repeated myself. "Medical ninjutsu, the art of healing. If I had to guess, there are other forms of ninjutsu as well. Like maybe seals, offensive magic, and the like?" She just stared at me with wide eyes that sparkled, making me chuckle. She must have heard me when she cleared her throat trying to hid her blush. She asked me with narrow eyes, "How do you know all of that if you're not from around here?" Mysterious girl POV. He knew about chakra and some of the arts, that's amazing. But how if he isn't from here, no other place knows of it? When I asked him how he knew of it, he said, "I may not be from here, but my mother was. She lived as an adult outside Azarath, you see. She taught a few minor things like chakra and what it could be used for. She didn't really capitalize on it. A few years ago I was attacked, she saved me, but not at the cost of her life. She used the spell to transport me, but I had to find my own way here." When he said his mother died saving him, my emotions, hearts went out to him. To grow up so young without his mother. I decided to ask his name, and he said, "Naruto Naruto. Sorry, I'm kinda used to the Japanese way of introducing oneself. It's Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. But you can just call me Naruto, nice to meet ya." He gave an eye-squinting grin that made me think he was a fox for some reason, maybe due to the whisker marks. It's weird, but if anyone else were to do what he is, I would have thought they were weird, but it seems to fit. When he asked me for my name, I proceeded to ask why. When he said, "It's customary to give one's name after someone has done the same." I won't lie, he's rather polite for someone so young. I decided to humor him and introduced myself. "My name is Rachel Roth, but you can just call me Raven." Normal POV. He cracked a big smile and said, "It's nice to meet you, Raven-chan. Now you were describing Azarath, right?" She just stared at him for a moment before scowling and said, "First off, it's Raven. Secondly, I was Azarath, as I said before, is a dimension parallel to Earth. We have the use of chakra, which you seem to have a grip on. You following me?" she said with a raised eyebrow. He nodded again with a large smile and said, "Yeah, I understand, but if this is a parallel dimension, then does that mean there is a means of crossing between the two worlds?" She paused for a moment and said with a shrug, "Yes, there is. Though where it is I don't know. But we must get you some medical attention. I took care of the minor injuries, but we gotta deal with the major ones." He nodded and said, "Lead the way, Ray-chan. My trust is in your hands." She scowled again but sighed, knowing he wasn't going to stop with the nickname, not that she hated it. Naruto thought she's a quite one, but she seems nice to get along with, no doubt about it. He jolted, making her look at him. She asked, "What's wrong?" A hint of concern in her voice. He shook his head and said, "When I was thinking, I could have sworn I heard something." She raised an eyebrow and said, "Something? You can tell me when we reach the medics." He nodded and continued to follow alongside her. But oddly enough to him, he could feel the fresh sense of negativity that reminded him of his time in the Leaf when he was a child. But the thing that got him was it wasn't aimed at him, no, it was aimed at his new friend/guide. He thought, "This reminds me of when I was young, but what could she have done to deserve this? She doesn't seem bad or look like she's done anything wrong?" Once again the voice rang in his head and said, "Maybe you two have something in common." He shook his head, subtly trying to clear his mind of the secondary voice, though this didn't go from the ever-observant eyes of Raven. The time they took to get there seemed like forever as they walked to the medic. He would hear insults aimed at her silently. "It's the demon spawn. How could the council allow her to roam free? The demon kidnapped that poor boy." He was thankful that his hair reached his hips as his tails blended in with his hair, if not slightly, and his ears just seemed like he retained some of his spiky hair if for only those 2 points, but that didn't stop him from growling silently at the people around him as he had flashbacks of his first childhood. Again, this didn't escape the ears of the empathy as she felt the anger roll off of him and wondered to herself and her emotoclones, why is he growling? He can't hear them, can he? Brave shrugged and said it's a possibility he does have wolf demon in him. Knowledge said he might be angry at how they're glaring at us. I wouldn't be surprised if he asked us sometime soon. Rage remarked, how would he know our pain? Timid said quietly, he might know I am sorry. Rude said, hey, if he does, he isn't as adorably dense as he appears. She just sighed and thought that she would find out when they reached the medic to check him out, which she was already doing, much to her emotoclone's joy. Though Naruto knew this due to his keen sight, he couldn't help but chuckle. Once the duo finally reached the medic center, the receptionist at the front saw a slightly pale boy with a minor tan and a pair of adorable whiskers. She had to resist the urge to scream cute and rub them, but when she saw Raven, she said, "What do you want, girl? You may be welcomed in the temple, but you're not welcomed here. Go home." Spiting the word girl like it left a horrible taste in her mouth. Raven may have tried to hide it, but due to his training as a shinobi, caught the shiver of fear run through her. He got in front of her, raising his killer intent lightly enough, yet still caused the air to vibrate around him in a small radius of 5 miles, only alerting the passerbys to their presence, which caused many to sweat. He said with a smile, yet his eyes held no kindness, only rage that was building up in him through the entire walk, and said, "Actually, madam, I was injured when Raven-chan here found me in the woods. You see, my mother was born here but left and married my father and gave birth to me. She and I were running to a safe point to where we could get away, but she was already nearing death and my injuries were too severe to get me to the portal on my own strength. She used the last of her energy and sent me here." He paused, lightly pushing the key higher, and said, "If it weren't for her and what healing skills she has, I would be dead now. I would like it if you didn't treat my friend so poorly, Kay?" His scary give the wrong answer and I'll make death look like a mercy-killing face. She nodded rapidly, which caused the key to evaporate, leaving those around them in a puddle of their own sweat. Raven thought, why is he defending me? Rage said, annoyed with her constant questions, maybe when you two get alone you can ask him. Shit, this is the 7th time at least you've asked us. We aren't him. The other emotions nodded in agreement, making her sigh as they were led into an examination room. It took 45 minutes to diagnose. He had 3 cracked ribs, 2 puncture wounds, and 2 broken ribs. To be honest to the medics, the doctor was curious as to how he was alive, to which he answered with a Raven-chan used what little healing she knew to mend some wounds. The doctor nodded and said she would be back in a moment, leaving the 2 demons alone in an uncomfortable silence. Raven was the first to break it, asking, "Why?" He looked towards her and said, "Why what, Raven-chan?" She shook her head and said, "Why are you being nice to me? Better yet, why were you defending me against the medic and growling at the people in the streets?" He just looked at her and smiled, though pained and strained after a moment, and said, "It's simple, Raven. I lived a life similar to how you are blamed for something you didn't do or weren't a willing participant in the events that had transpired." As he said this, he continued to lure in Raven and her emotions, who saw the look of pain reflect on his face from the screen in Raven's mind. The only thought on all of their minds are, what could you have gone through to have such a look, Naruto? He continued as if he read their thoughts. "Where I'm from, I was hated, beaten and abused due to an attack on my village the same day of my birth. It went from the glares you just received to a well-thrown bottle or hard/sharp object. Parents even told their children to avoid me at all costs or join in on the attacks. On my birthday it wasn't any better." As he said this, she gasped, bringing a hand to cover her mouth. He paused as he took a long exhale, the years of pain he experienced evident on his face. He said as his eyes turned a darker color, "On my birthday I was chased by mobs. I would try to run, but they would always find me before I could get home. Several times I've looked death in the face just for him to tell me, you're not ready yet." He stared at the wall with a motionless expression as he recounted the moments before he was accepted in a morbid silence, letting the young girl across from him to digest what she was told. After what seemed like hours, he said, "Take a guess, Raven. Why did my home glare at me like they do you? Why was I treated like a monster for something I wasn't even old enough to comprehend?" The more he spoke, the more she thought, like me, he's hated for something out of his control. He's glared at like me? And he had the familiar energy around him. She stopped as she and her emotions caught on to the final conclusion of his story. "You're a demon like me, aren't you?" she said, silently unsure of how to take this information. He gave a small smile while tapping the tip of his nose and said, "Ding ding ding, give this beautiful young lady a medal for getting the answer in one. Her prize, the full history of my life before I came here one day in the future." She raised an eyebrow at that remark. "Full history of his life? He can't be any older than I am, a year or two older. How much history could a 6-year-old have?" She catalogued that bit of information away for a later time to ask, or for him to ask about her to rebuttal, when the doctor returned and said, "Well, mister, I didn't catch your name, young man." He chuckled and said, "Well, ma'am, my name is Naruto Naruto, at your service." "Now you were saying?" She nodded and said, "Oh yes, well, you're free to go, young man, but you should take it easy. Though it seems you don't have any records here in Azarath as far as I can see. Do you have anywhere to stay?" He nodded his head and said, "Yes, I have a small hut to stay at. That will suffice for the moment, missus." She giggled, much to Raven's unknown ire, and said, "Monroe is fine, Naruto." He nodded and said, "Yes, thank you, Monroe-san, I should be fine, thank you." She nodded and walked off once again, leaving the two young demons alone again, when Raven said, "You don't have a home. Why did you lie?" He looked her in the eye and said, "Well, I do have a home, it just isn't built here in the city, and a prepare at your leisure sort of home." She just raised an eyebrow in suspicion and said, "Why don't you show me then? There is still so much that isn't known about you." He chuckled and said, "All right, right, follow me back out to the woods, I just gotta get my scrolls back." She nodded and said, "Fine, just hurry up, I've got stuff I gotta deal with." Again he nodded and rushed to wherever the doctor placed his belongings. Once he got his belongings, he and Raven once again made their way towards the forest where she first found him. He grabbed the moderate-sized scroll and said to her from behind him, "You might want to step back a bit, I don't want you to get caught in the backlash." Not questioning him, she nodded and took a good 20 paces back till she was in the tree line. From where she stood it was a good distance away, but she saw some elaborate markings on the inside of the seal. He started performing weird hand gestures, making her wonder, what is he doing, and what is with those hand gestures? I've never seen those before. Knowledge said, "We're just gonna have to wait and ask when he's finished." Raven nodded and waited in silence as he finished the long line of gestures as he said, "Unseal." Before she could take a step forward, a large plume of smoke followed by a huge gust of wind caused her to lose her footing for a moment, making her cover her eyes in the process. When she was sure she could look again, there was Naruto holding the same scroll from earlier, and to her surprise a estate of some sort that had a swirl insignia at the door. He turned to her and said, "Care to come in for some tea? I'm sure you have a few questions to ask?" She nodded and followed him, and thinking to herself, "Why do I feel like my life is about to change?" The other emoticlones could only shrug, wondering the same thing. As they walked into the estate, Naruto announced as he stepped to the side, "Welcome to my humble abode, Raven-chan." She, to say the least, was in awe by the inside of the home. It had a moderate-sized love seat that would fit for two comfortably. The couch next to it was a moderate-sized black suede couch that formed a U shape that several people could lie head to feet respectively. In front of it was a decent HD plasma screen television mounted on the wall above an old-school fireplace. Next to the TV was a picture of a man that looked like Naruto but minus the whisker marks, and instead of the long silver hair was a head of spiky sun-kissed blonde hair and deep sapphire blue eyes. The woman he had his arms around looked more like Naruto, especially with the feminine physique. She had the same eyes as Naruto and hair color and length. Must be his parents, he looks like a mix of both of them. They look so happy, Raven thought as she continued to look around. As he continued to show her around, they came across several bedrooms, each with their own bathroom. Outside of those rooms were 3 bathrooms. A library of sorts big enough to hold the Azarathian library. The kitchen was rather large, as was the dining room, though it looked like it wasn't used in some time. She then noticed a large door with a complex scrolling on the door, making her wonder what was in it. On the wall next to the love seat was a guitar. After the tour, she turned to him and asked, "How did you do all this? It shouldn't be possible." He grinned and said, "Chakra. What I used was the sealing arts, which lets you use a variety of things like barriers, traps, explosives, etc." If it were possible, her eyes were widened beyond description. She thought, how is it that the monks never knew of these arts? She repeated her thought, and his reply was, "It's rather simple, Raven-chan. The sealing arts are a rather difficult and equally dangerous art to learn, and so few master." "Why is that, Naruto?" Raven inquired, wondering how it was so difficult drawing some squiggles. He smiled and said, "It's dangerous because you need a high mastery in calligraphy, for example." He pulled out an explosive seal and said, "This here is an explosive seal. The stronger the grade of paper and the design of the seal, the stronger the explosion. If you screw up the seal by the tiniest margin, it will cost you mainly by blowing up on you." She gulped and nodded her head, understanding what me now meant by difficult to learn, but knowledge wanted to inquire more as to the intricacy of seals, and said, "What do you mean so few master?" He scratched the back of his head and replied, "Well, what I mean is that when it comes to seals, it's like doing a puzzle blindfolded. To some, the script for the seals don't click as well for some as it does for others. For example, I take to seals like a fish in water, where I was making high-quality barrier fail-safe seals at the age of 5, where the person who taught my father couldn't do the same till he was in his late 40s. She just stared at him and wondered what exactly is he, for him to understand something so complex and make it look easy, and to say a full-grown adult with more experience took longer to learn the same? Brave asked, "Maybe you should ask if he could train you." Before she could rebuttal, knowledge said, "I must agree with the brute. We're in our 2nd year at the temple learning from them, and we are being held back. People who started the same year as us are already farther ahead." She heard the other emotions in her head, and oddly enough a soft voice cooing to her about being close to him. She made sure to catalog that for later to investigate, and asked him if he could train her. He asked, "For what reason would you use what I teach you?" She raised an eyebrow and asked, "What do you mean?" He sighed and said, "I learn all of this, all the arts, to protect the people I care about, not for something like senseless violence. So tell me, Raven, what is your reason for wanting to learn?" That put her in a stump. She was just interested in the arts, and wanted to learn, but that made her think what would be her reason. Everyone hates her but him, even her mother doesn't like her. He was the only one to be willing to be around her, and to make her feel comfortable with herself. The two of them even shared a similar pain, and felt a strange warmth from him, even that strange emotion that keeps talking about him in an odd light. That feel only seems to persist whenever he's around, even though she just met him. She had this desire to be there for him. After a while she said, I guess it's to protect what I care about." He nodded and said, "Excellent, we can begin your training tomorrow since it's late, but quick question, where is your mom? Isn't she worried?" She just frowned in retaliation and said, "She couldn't care less about my well-being, seeing as she's the head of the temple." He frowned and thought, note to self, have a strong talk with her in the future. He smiled and said, "Well then, I guess you're just going to have to stay here then. That way we don't have to waste time for you to walk here to train. We can start bright and early tomorrow." She nodded as she yawned and said, "All right, but where will I sleep?" He chuckled and said, "You're welcome to take my bed. I can sleep on the couch till we can get your room set up." Again she nodded and headed up to bed, but stopped at the top of the stairs and said, "Thanks for everything, Naruto-kun." He chuckled and said, "I guess things are going to get really interesting." Flashback. "Naruto?" Raven asked as she walked beside him as through the temple to the council chambers. What's up, Raven-chan? Something wrong?" he asked, his voice and face filled with worry. Over the 2 months he's been a resident of Azarath, he changed his clothing from his time in the elemental nations to something a bit practical for training and recreation. He wore black slipper-like shoes with red and white lining. His pants were black with 3 belts. The one around his waist was a gray wrap that had a red X across the front of the belt. The other 2 belts were hanging off the sides of his waist. Both had a white wolf tail at the ends of them, and cleverly one large one was disguised as a his-ten. He wore a black and gray tunic that had a sort of lotus design at the end of the shirt that was left open at the front save for an emblem holding it close at the top, and at the back was a design of a gray wolf running below a moon. On his arms were a form of gauntlet went up to his elbow. Raven still wore her clothing from when they last met, save for when they're training. She said, "Aren't you worried that the temple's monks might be up to something, Naru? I mean, they aren't necessarily kind towards me, and I don't want them to farm you by association?" He smiled at her even though she doesn't make it visibly known to anyone she cares about him deeply, yet she can't find what this feeling is. She still makes it known that she worries for him. He said as her held her tightly, making her blush. Ah, Ray-chan does love me. Oh, I love you too, Ray. She shoved him off of her and said, Stupid, this is serious. I don't want you to get hurt. The last part she said quietly, making him smile appreciatively and kiss her forehead, making her blush, and said, Ray, I know you're afraid of what might happen, but you gotta remember I'm stronger than I look. You don't gotta worry, I won't leave you. She smiled as they stopped at the door, making her sweat a bit, till he placed his hand on her shoulder, as he said, Besides, when have I ever taken shit from others? She honestly had to pause, knowing that he was right on that concept. Whenever it came to people, pissing him off was something that most never mentally recovered from. Even her emotions, save for rage, brave and oddly happy, shook in fear. Rage. She was a purring mess, same for the other two, making her fight down a blush, but nodded to her wolf friend and said, Just be careful, okay? He smiled at her and nodded, saying, Yeah, I'll be careful, Ray-chan. Now let's go and get this over with. The sooner we deal with these guys, the quicker we can get back to your tour training, hee. She had to suppress a shiver as he said training. His idea of training was an inhuman amount of physical exercises, a full 3 hours of chakra-controlled training, and an introductory course on Fuinjutsu. On of the introductions were on the self-adapting gravity and resistance seals, element protection seals to defend against someone using elemental attacks. It was the first time she ever wanted to cry for her mother. Once the two of them steeled their nerves, they walked into the council room to see a large archaic domain of an old-fashioned Renaissance library. Inside the Renaissance-esque domain were several stands that reached from one wall all the way to the other, making Naruto sweat drop and think, please don't tell me this isn't like the Leaf where they got someone who has a monster-sized ego. I pray not. Everything was deathly silent, to the point to where Naruto's enhanced hearing could hear each and every one of their heartbeats, making him wonder when someone is gonna say something. After a half hour of the monks just staring at them, Naruto coughed and said, Is there a reason you summoned us, or is this just a huge waste of time? I mean, if it is, we can just go, because some fucker decided to send a messenger to my home and say the council demanded to see us at 5 in the morning. So if this meeting was a waste of time, someone is gonna die. The ki and yukai in the air was terrifying to everyone but Raven, who found comfort in the demonic energy wrapping around her like a blanket. He said with his voice enhanced, frightening everyone minus Raven, Well, someone going to say something? The monk on the left said with little bravery he could muster, WWEH heard that someone unknown to the populace of Azarath was causing problems, and his acquaintance following closely behind him. He said accusingly while saying acquaintance with disdain. Naruto scoffed and said, while his voice is no longer demonic, is still as cold as the Arctic winds, Well, if you got your facts straight, you would also know that the person who ran the clinic was being a dick. When Raven found me, I was injured pretty badly, and the medic refused to treat my wounds with Raven in my presence. All I did was give a verbal lashing after he disrespected Raven-chan. Raven-chan? Don't tell me you're close with this thing. Another counselor practically shouted, moronically invoking Naruto's rage, unleashing a focused blast of ki solely on that man when he saw a look of pain strike Raven's face while her mother looked on condescendingly. He said, Now I know you didn't call Raven-chan a thing, did you? I know you and the people on this council are not that suicidal. They all shook their heads quickly, making him lessen the ki slightly while keeping his false sweet smile as Raven's mother said, Now I don't think we got your name? He kept the smile which continued to say watch where you tread and said, I do believe it's common courtesy to give your name before asking for someone's in exchange, madam. She nodded and said, Pardon me, my name is Arella Roth, head of the temple, and you are? He growled silently, which didn't go unnoticed by those present, as he said, You're Raven-chan's mother. I am Naruto Naruto. Arella said, May I ask why the unneeded hostility, Naruto-san? He scoffed and said, I don't like women who hate their own children for something that they weren't responsible for. To be honest, you and everyone in this chamber and out are fools and ignorant ones at that. A nun to her right asked with a scowl marred on her face, And how are we ignorant, child? You blame Raven-chan for something she didn't do? You treat Raven as if she is the one who did the rape in the first place. A mother is supposed to love and nurture and protect her children, and yet Queenie there hasn't done shit for her daughter. She has only gotten her the bare minimum of her training. And the fact that she has told me she's been kicked out of her home and by orders to not let her into any establishment. He said, his anger growing higher till everyone started to see a faint silhouette of a four-legged figure behind him with 10 tails. Arella said, "What? But I never authorized such orders," quickly realizing the slip-up as Naruto barked out. So it's true you kicked out your own daughter to fend for herself, her with a meager education in any of the arts here to defend herself? Yet you can't defend yourself from Trigon as he took advantage of you? Her eyes narrowed and said, "What do you mean by that?" He smirked and said, "Well, it makes me think. You someone who has enough strength to handle Trigon while mind you was in his human form with little power to at least restrain you for a moment from what I hear. Yet everyone here simply believed that you got raped? Either the people here are simple or you're a better actress than you are a nun lady." He sighed and said as she began to fume, "So this is what's going to happen. Raven is going to be staying with me from this point on permanently. You're going to take away the ban from preventing Raven to purchase anything. If I get word that she has been overcharged for the simplest of things or given rotten produce, I will come down here and raise the place to non-existence. And I will take over her training, seeing as you and everyone here are utter failures, seeing as they refuse to properly train her." Arella asked. "And what right do you have?" He focused on her and raised his yukai, causing his 10 tails to flare out, and said, "'Cause I am Naruto Uzumaki Nami fucking Kaze, and I am a motherfucking Biju." He put his hand on Raven's shoulder and harangued them out of the room, leaving a group of shaken people as they looked in his eyes that promised to keep his word. Flashback over. He felt a pair of arms wrap around his neck from behind when he heard, "What are you thinking about, Naruto-kun? You must have been thinking pretty hard." Even though the two of them are together, he wanted to hold out on the physical aspect of the relationship till they were older, since they were no older than 10. I elevated their age. He smiled and wrapped his tails around her waist, causing her to be dragged into his lap, and said with a mock glare, "Was that supposed to be a mock at my intelligence, love?" She pulled an innocent look on her sweat-ridden form and said, "I don't know what you mean, oh all-knowing Jubi-sama." Thought they didn't. To the actual act, they did flirt constantly when alone and kissed or made out and bathed together. When he was up one night after training late, she asked him to honestly tell her his past, which he was hesitant about, but relented in telling her everything from his birth to his existence here in Azarath, which made her open up, knowing he would defeat her father. She still wore the leotard with the long sleeves and pants, but that was for public wear. For training she would wear pants similar to Naruto's with a muscle shirt hugged her developing frame and low B-cup, as the hem of the shirt was tucked into the jeans, all in navy blue and black with a bit of red lining. Her hair goes to her lower back with a long white streak going through it. He growled and said, "Oh, now you've done it!" Before she could make a remark, she was flipped onto her back with her arms above her head as Naruto brought his head to her neck and said, "You should know better than to toy with a wolf. Raven, while docile in their domain, doesn't mean they won't get aggressive." Lemon skipped. Before she reached her finish, Naruto stopped short, making her eyes snap open and whined disapprovingly. He set his head still in the crook of her neck and said, "Sorry, Harem, but that's what happens when you mess with the Jubi." Getting up, he made his way over to the house from their training ground, whistling, and said as he peeked his head from out the door, "I'll heat up the bath for you, okay?" I could only nod weakly as my body continued to burn from his earlier pleasurable ministrations on my person, making the others laugh as I growled out in frustration. I thought to myself, haha, very funny. Now can one of you heal me? My body is numb from his touch. God, I love that man. Brave said, "I just don't see why you don't take him to his room or ours and lay him happy," and Timid nodded. "Or at the least ask him to sleep with us from here on. Nightmares from our bastard father or no knowledge," muttered with love. Raven POV. Damn, he really knows how to get me. God, I want him, I thought to myself as I watched the person I love, the sole person to be there for me through everything I've experienced here, walk into. I guess it's our home since I live with him and am in a romantic relationship with him besides the 6 Happy and Brave said in a sing-song manner, making my already heated body radiate even more heat. I swear I heard a tree get uprooted. That's like the 8th time this month. Can't blame you or us for loving him. He defends us, loves us, and treats us with appreciation, Knowledge said in her know-it-all tone. Yeah, and the fact that he has the physique to make any girl which it has weak in the knees, Rage said after Naruto helped me learn to get her to calm down, and taught her how to use her demonic power, or as he calls it yukai, completely expelling my father from her, destroying his connection. Proof of my own demonic blood would be the wit streaks in my hair. He truly is a wonderful and loving mate, Timid said with rude nodding in agreement. It's wonderful we have such an amazing man, but from what you've read in his studies, strong beings like him need more than one mate, but I know we will get along with him. As long as they know we're the top bitch and bears his children first, then, and we get along with them, then I've got no problem, Love said with rage, quickly adding her 2 cents. Though they make a solid point, we've been with him the longest. If anyone gives him a kid first, it's me, but with these horny bitches ogling my man like Naruto does when I make ramen. That wouldn't be so if you lay your claim on him now before these girls get desperate, Raven, Love said as she and the other emoticlones felt Raven still try and fail at calming down her sustained orgasm. Raven said weakly, no, I promised Naruto that we wouldn't do any of that till we were older. Another shudder ran through her, making her moan, and said as a forethought, now can one of you at least heal my body? He kinda made me numb. Brave said, trying to get her motivated. One Ray, he's at least in his 20s even though he's 10. But I will if you get to pull out our well-shaped ass and ask if you can sleep with him from now on. Once I managed to get up, I checked my ass and said okay, while I won't deny that fact that it is nice, firm, and still growing rather shapely, but why bring it into discussion, and why are you all even badgering me about Naruto? You were all fine with me doing things at my own pace. Even Timid growled at me and purred, looking at him from the time we took a dip in the lake. That's not normal for her. I could feel the heat in my core cool as I muttered, getting my balance shakily. At least I have a reason to change clothes. Noticing the huge wet stain in the crotch. It's because of a few reasons, Raven. 1, he's our unofficial mate till we do the actual act. 2, we love him as much as you, but let's face it, you've kissed every now and then, cuddle when watching TV. And he even sleeps with you when you have those nightmares from your father, which you've purged. And 3, which can't be stressed enough, you're hitting your mating cycle, girl. Knowledge roared into my ear. My ears were ringing as I groaned softly and replied, okay, first owl. Second, I know it's mating season. Why do you think I've been doing it myself for so long? Hell, since we've been around him, his scent alone flares my desires, though him doing this to me doesn't help my problem. Then if you want to wait, then at least do things orally. Then hell, in terms of demons' age, you're old enough for that, so in the eyes of humans it's frowned upon, but with demons it's an everyday thing. But just sleep with him, and no, not sleep with him, Rage remarked. As I walk towards the house and up the stairs, I respond, I know, but damn it, I don't want to rush things, you know. Knowledge sighed and said, look, Raven, let's be truthful, you've staved off your heat either from self-ministrations or your make-out sessions with him, but at the most you've got a year, 2 years max before you go feral and take him, whether you're ready or not. I groaned in both frustration and pleasure, hearing the bath water running, making me think appreciatively, I love that man, but fine, I'll talk to him about this, okay, if he is willing to help me stave off my feral desires till I'm ready to reciprocate, okay? They all nodded in my head and saw Naruto without his shirt, showing his scars, and 2 particularly long scars going parallel with each other as they go down his sides from the collarbone to the heels of his feet. I know I shouldn't be staring, but I love him and his body. He turned to me and said, well, your bath is all heated up, Ray, enjoy yourself. Giving me a kiss as he walked out the door. Regular POV. Man, what to cook for dinner tonight? Naruto said aloud as he walked towards his room to take a bath at his bedroom shower. When are you gonna claim your mate, boss? A voice in his head said. He got in the shower after it reached the appropriate temperature and said, I told you, Temperance, when she is ready to, I will accept, I won't force her. After the first month of Naruto staying in Azarath, he was pulled into his mindscape to meet several doppelgangers of him in different clothes and colors. Red was fury, blue was joy, white was temperance, virtue, gray was sadness, green was wisdom, black was vengeance. There were several others, but they tend to keep to themselves. Anyways, Temperance said, I know, King, and that's why she loves you. You honor and respect women. He chuckled as he rinsed out his hair of the soap and thought, I can't help but wonder when the cycle starts. I want to be prepared to keep me from jumping Raven-chan. Wisdom said, adjusting his glasses, you've got 2 years before you will breaks and jump her. Even thought you two do your recreational activities that sates your lust for each other for a moment. Naruto nodded and said, thanks, Wisdom. Any suggestion as to what to make for dinner? As soon as those words left his lips, every emotion in his mind roared, voicing what he should make, and arguments going on between an emotion's polar opposites, as they clash sometimes in 3-person brawls. He sighed and tuned them out, leaving his bathroom using a combination of katon, fire release, and futon, wind release, to dry off as his body began to radiate steam. He placed on some baggy black sweatpants that barely hung at his waist, drooping slightly, with a gray muscle shirt tucked into the pants. As he walked downstairs, he heard Raven still splashing around in the tub across from his room, meaning she was still bathing. He thought Ravens mastered the intermediate physical training schedule earlier than I had anticipated. Now I gotta get her real training regimen set up. What all will I need? His body on autopilot, he made 3 clones to prepare a decent midnight dinner. He grabbed a piece of paper and wrote his thoughts. I'm gonna need to pick her a fighting style or 2 to learn. She learned how to use a large number of combat weapons, meaning should her powers no longer work, she would be able to defend herself. I've already trained her in seals at the Uzumaki level. She would be a high chunin low jounin. Her stamina is, while not as high as mine, is still something to be amazed with. Tactics and strategy she can give an Nara for their money, but that doesn't mean she's the best. I've refrained from teaching her the excessive ninjutsu till her control and reserves were high enough, including her yukai, to train her in jujitsu. Now with her reserves in terms of a tailed beast, which I feel if I mark her will become one, will be as strong as the 8 or 7 tails, but she has amazed me to no end thus far. She might have more than me now. It's been a while since I've checked. I'll train her in her elemental manipulation when I figure out her affinity. He felt something supple and firm press into his back as a pair of arms wrapped around his waist. He said, "Hey Ravenheim, what's up?" She kissed the back of his neck as she stroked his cheek with her thumb, making him go rigid and purr uncontrollably. He thought I purr, even thought I'm a wolf. I will never understand myself. Raven said in his ear, "What are you doing, Naruto? This is the second time in a single day I've gotten the better of you. Are you okay?" He smiled and said, "Yeah, it's just that we've gotten your basic training up to the point to where you're ready for the real training in the chamber. You remember what I said on the chamber, right?" He felt her nod as she responded knowingly with a smile. "Of course, the chamber in the room is a training ground created by your mother that bends space and time to flow differently outside of the flow of the world around it, to be either faster or slower. For example, if you wanted to slow time down in there a year, and there would be a month or 2 outside. Or in reverse, right, Naruto-kun?" He smiled and said, "That's right. For the week after next we will spend 4 months in the chamber, which will be 2 years in there, alright? Although my mom seemed kind of vague as to certain things, like how we would age if we're outside of the world's control of time." She smiled and said, "Okay, so what all will I be learning from my sensei?" she said teasingly. He handed her the papers and waited for her to respond while thinking with his emoticlones 3, 2, 1E. "What is all of this? The gravity and resistance seals are going to be advanced by 4 levels. 0. He smiled and said, "Well, love, the chamber's gravity is already greater than Earth's by 3 times. Thanks to your demonic blood, your already body is going to adjust to the difference in gravity." He turned around to see her wearing one of his oversized white shirts that hung off one shoulder that came just below the hip, giving him a peek at her red panties. With her seeing this, she said, "Something you like, Naruto-kun?" teasingly lifting the hem of the shirt, giving him more of a view of her underwear. He growled lightly, grabbing her waist, pulling her towards himself, saying, "Always do, but dinner is ready, so let's eat. Made your favorite to celebrate your completion of your basic training, even in the arts the monks teach." Raven knows her lover and all, but the actual act is easy to forgive. But the monks, and by extension her mother, are in the shit list, with her father at the second position of the list, her mother taking first, and the monks third. She asked why her mother take first, yet her father was second. His answer was, "Even though he is a monster who ruined your life, he did one good thing that made him okay in my book by a degree. He made you my dark angel." Those were the words that got the 2 of them together. They ate in comfortable silence, watched a few movies, cozied up on the couch till they decided to turn in. But to Naruto, the entire time they were spending together, it seemed like something was on her mind, like she was apprehensive about something. As they reached their rooms, he said, "Night, Ravens, sleep well, love," as he kissed her, about to go into his room, when he felt a pair of arms wrap around his waist as she said, "Naruto-kun, can I sleep with you from here on? I can't sleep without you near me anymore." He smiled as he turned around to face, having to look down slightly since the top of her head came to his chin, making their height difference, with Naruto being 4 feet 9 inches as she was 4 foot 7-46. He brought his hand to her chin, tilting her head up, and said, "Of course you don't have to ask, Raven-chan, you know that." Bringing her lips closer, he kissed her briefly and said, Let's get to bed, okay, love? She buried her head in his chest and nodded, walking into the bedroom, laying down in the large king-sized bed with her head laying on his chest directly over his heart, listening to it beat lightly, as if she was listening to a soft symphony. He stroked her head gently and said, "Good night, Ravenheim, see you in the morning." She looked up and said, "Good night, Naruto, see you in the morning." Week overview. Over the week the two spent it just relaxing and helping Raven adjust to her body's adjustments to the gravity and resistance seals since he had her deactivate them. Thanks to those seals she can run as fast as Lee could with his weights on and half as fast as he can without them, and while her strength isn't as far as Tsunade's, she can still destroy a decent-sized building with minor injury to herself. But with the shadow clone training method, which they found out like Naruto doesn't suffer the mental overload, and uses them as a boon in her training in the medical field. While she can't heal virtually anything like Tsunade once could, she can heal anything up to a removed limb, which came in handy when Naruto was training. He accidentally removed his hand. Don't ask, she just laughed at his mistake for the rest of the week. The next week. As the sunlight shone through the curtains and across the room, the two demons shared for an entire week. As the rays bent across the room, they struck the new lord of the Biju, making him groan, blinking blearily, and irritably thinking, "One day I will destroy the sun even if it kills me." You're a bit overly dramatic, aren't you?" Happy said in a joyous tone that made him groan further. "I've never been a morning person, you know that. On that note, or a night owl for that matter," he thought. "MMH, more Narukuin," Raven murmured unknowingly, pushing herself deeper against him, pushing her developing chest against him, making him blush as his emotions laughed. He grumbled, "Oh, shut up. Damn it, now I don't want to move. What to do? You could always just stay there till she wakes up," Temperance suggested, making him nod. So he did, and waited for another hour. Since he woke up at 5 in the morning, he was always the type to be an early riser, brushing his hand through the sea of purple and white, hearing her moan. As she stirred, she blinked blearily, feeling a comfortable warmth and something stroking her. As she looked up, she woke fully to see the man she's loved for 2 months look at her contentedly with a smile and love in those gray-white eyes she loves so much. She shifted till her stomach was on his and they were face to face. She said softly, "Morning, how long have you been awake?" He smiled softly, kissing her, and said, "Not too long, at least half an hour. I was just so comfortable I didn't want to move." She smiled, adjusting herself till she was straddling his stomach, her thighs gripped tightly to his sides as she looked down at him, and said, "So we're going on that 2-year training regimen today, right?" He placed his hands on her waist and said, "Yup, so you might want to pack some stuff for that you can do during breaks, like books or something." She bends down till they were face to face and said with a sultry smile, "Okay, Wolfie, but what if that something is right under me?" He smirked and said, "Well, I guess we'll just have to wait, huh, love, but what makes you think you can handle me?" She grinned, showing her sharp fangs as she brings herself closer towards his neck and grazed his neck with her teeth, making him groan as she smirks and says, "I know I can handle you because I'm the only one who knows you, Wolfie." He chuckles, thinking, true, she does. "No shit, she knows everything about us, favorite foods and activities you like to do when you're bored," Happy said as he tuned them out, kissing her lightly. He sighed sadly and said, "Love, as much as I would enjoy being with you like this, and I can't believe I am saying this, but we gotta get ready or we're never gonna start your training." She gave a fake pout and said, "Damn, and I was just getting in the mood." He chuckled as he sat up with her in his lap, kissing her again, and said, "Hey, play your cards right, and maybe, just maybe, while we're training you might get a reward for being a good girl." She smiled at him with lidded eyes and kissed him before running towards a shower, leaving Naruto in his room to bathe and prepare breakfast. He looked towards his alarm clock as it read 6:25, making him smirk, thinking, let's see, for the training ground time flows differently, so to prepare the body will flow with the time flow of the realm they're in. So if me and Raven are going in there for 4 months, then our bodies will age by 4 years to prepare. During the war, while I was training to master Kurama's power, it took about a month. He paused while in the shower and thought, I still haven't mastered my own yokai. I mean, I can use 4 tails worth of power without losing my control, so I gotta train in that aspect. Getting out of the shower and looking in the mirror, he activated his eyes. They were purple with 6 coincided rings going from the pupil out, while the inner 3 rings were red with the basic Sharingan eye with 1 tomos spinning lazily around the pupil each. He thought, what does it do? I mean, with the Sharingan it lets the user copy anything they see and slows down time for the user, capable of making ocular illusions and use of Amaterasu, Kamui, Izanagi, and Susanoo along with Tsukuyomi. While the Rinnegan lets the user manipulate the elements and gravity, but with these new eyes who knows what they can do. I'll have to take this slow, don't want to do something reckless. Getting out, he changed into a red form of the clothes he wore previously and packed similar clothes of different colors into a moderately large duffel bag. He made his way towards the study and smirked, seeing a large pile of scrolls ranging from taijutsu, genjutsu, ninjutsu, kenjutsu, fuinjutsu, medical ninjutsu, and sealed them all into a large scroll, attaching it to the small of his back with chakra. Making his way back, he started making breakfast, which included a large variety of toast, sausage, pancakes, orange juice, fruit, and many other hearty varieties. As he waited, he began writing out Raven's training schedule, which comprised of Raven's training schedule. Years 1-2. Ninjutsu, chakra control and techniques, and add chakra suppression seals to increase her reserves from high chunnin to at least that of the 3 tails by end of the 2nd year. Taijutsu, increase weight and resistance seals to increase her speed, strength, and stamina, and work on her natural flexibility, and find her a suitable taijutsu style or styles. Medical ninjutsu, teach her the human anatomy to further her training in the medical arts and use medical supplies, i.e., scalpels, needles, etc. Kenjutsu, further her training in weapons and throwing weapons, including how to counter them. Years 3-4. Fuinjutsu, increase her skill in Fuinjutsu from Uzumaki Chunin to Uzumaki Elite or higher and increase her speed when doing the seals. Taijutsu, further advance her master in close combat. Ninjutsu, further increase her reserves from 3 tails to at the minimum 6 tails and speed of hand seals, and improve her ability to use her original skill in chakra, the abilities she had originally, and work on handless seals. Yukai training, help her have full control of her demonic chakra, making Trigon's power her own, making her power from the equivalent of the 2 tails to that of at least the 4 tails. As he inspected her training regimen, he heard a seat grind against the hardwood floor next to him, and said, "Hey love, eat up. Once we're finished we can head out to train." She nodded and stacked her plate with several slices of toast covered in jelly, a few dozen pieces of bacon and sausage, some eggs, and a half-a-mile-high stack of pancakes with syrup. Let it be known that due to Demon's abnormally high metabolism, throwing in with Naruto's training form, hell, she's become as bad a bottomless pit as Naruto, who had 2 times as much as Raven. After eating their fill of the banquet-style breakfast, Naruto saw the clock in the kitchen read 7:25 and said, "Well, Ravenheim, you got everything you're going to need for our time in the chamber, because it's going to be some time before we get back?" She nodded as they made their way towards the door with a huge seal across from it, and said, "Well, let's get this show on the road." He applied chakra to the seal, making the room glow with a blinding white light, causing them to shield their eyes as they waited for the light to fade. When it dimmed, the door was no longer sealed as Naruto opened the door and said, "Well, let's go. These next 4 years won't wait for anyone." Walking through with Raven following close behind him to never be seen to the world for 4 months. Inside the training ground. Everything about the training ground blew Naruto and Raven's mind as they saw a giant phosphorescent tree in the middle of a giant lake, which as they looked up made them come to the conclusion of their being inside a cave of some sort. A few yards away was a large house, one which was slightly smaller than the one they'd been in for a few months. While all around the cavern were average-sized trees which, while not as bright as the one in the lake, but still had that faint phosphorescent glow to it, giving the area that soft sea-green glow. If they were to look up, they would see rocks floating high above them. Before either of them knew it, the gravity of the world hit them quite hard, making them realize the gravity was at least 3 or 4 times that of Earth. Raven was the first to speak her amazement. "It's beautiful here, so peaceful." He could only nod in agreement, as he was too estranged in the environment's wonder, as he could feel the natural energy was over him in this domain, with the focal point being the tree, as it radiated it at immense levels to where it could be felt in every molecule in the air, the water surrounding the tree, and the earth they're standing on. Naruto turned to Raven and said, "Well, let's go take a look at the place we'll be staying in for the next 4 years, love. From what my mom told me about this place, the supplies within stay stocked, so we don't need to worry on the food shortage or of it spoiling with us around, huh?" She had to suppress a snort at that one. The two of them could eat several restaurants into going out of business, and still have enough room for seconds. As they made their way towards their temporary home for the next 4 years, the more of the home they began to see. Outside the house was an indoor hot spring bath for the two of them to use. Inside the home was a replica of the house from the location of their rooms all the way to the indoor bathhouse. The only difference to the rooms were that they were slightly bigger with bigger beds. He turned to Raven as they set their clothes in the dresser together in one of the bedrooms and said, "Well, Ray, we got 4 years, so let's get this training regimen started, alright?" She nodded rather quickly with a small smile on her face, thinking, I wonder what we're going to be doing for the next 4 years. Wisdom shrugged and said if it's an advancement from the last few months of training the basics, he's going to be doing the serious training, which means he's going to have us learn a fighting style or more, increase our stamina. He's going to increase our chakra control and reserves, find out our elemental affinity or affinities, and learn jutsu outside the elemental properties and further improve our medical jutsu skills. Same for Fuinjutsu, we know the basic seals like barriers and suppression seals. He's probably going to teach us the more advanced seals. Rage and the others nodded while she said, and he may likely help you train in controlling your demonic energy. We already can control it to a near total unison for a couple hours before we fall back into our rage. He might also help focus on weapons to use should our powers stop working. We can defend ourselves. She and the others had to agree with their logic, seeing as they already had a basic understanding of their training. As she finished putting up their clothes, he said, "Alright, let's get into our training gear and head outside and get these first 2 years over with." Nodding, she grabbed her training clothes, which consisted of a tight navy blue sports bra and, from what Naruto calls them, umbu-styled pants, with a pair of sandals, running downstairs where she sees him sitting outside under a tree near the house as he waited for her. He opened an eye and said, while closing them again, as he said, "Alright now, Raven, as you know, over the last few months from our time in Azarath, I've been training you and I have been grading your skills by the way my world graded someone's skills." He pulled out a scroll and tossed it to her as he said, "And these are your rankings accordingly." Once she opened them, the scroll read, Rachel Raven Roth. Taijutsu High Chunin, no known fighting style and repertoire. Genjutsu, Low Chunin, can sense illusions and negate them and use high C-rank genjutsu without much problem. Ninjutsu, High Genin, no known jutsu outside of the non-elemental jutsu range, amount known, 10. Kenjutsu, Mid Genin, knows how to read opponents and react and counter the enemy, and is capable of adjusting to whatever weapon she picks up, no known preference to use. Medical Ninjutsu, Low Chunin, can use several high-ranking jutsu and can heal every surface injury and a few interior injuries, and is well traversed in the medicine and poisons. Fuinjutsu, Uzumaki Chunin, knows all basic seals and several advanced seals. Stamina, High Chunin Low Jounin. Chakra reserves, High Chunin gotta get that to that of the 3 tails or higher by the first year. Chakra control, Low Chunin gotta improve that. Yukai, can you stay in control of that energy for a time frame of 4 hours before loss of control. As Raven looked over her records, she had to think, wow, just from the basics he's taught me, most of my skills are above Genin, much to my surprise. Knowledge said it's to be expected since he had us learn the Shadow Clone Jutsu to help with the control and other techniques that don't require something physical like Genjutsu, and the like. What I'm curious about is how he intends to get our reserves up so high. She was wondering how that was going to happen herself, so she asked, "Naruto-kun, not that I'm questioning your sanity, but how in your mother's green earth do you intend to get my reserves that high in the first 2 years of the training session?" He gave a dark grin, making her uneasy. "Why, Raven-chan, it's a good thing you asked, as I'm going to be placing a chakra depletion seal on your person. With that seal, it will rapidly absorb your chakra till you start to suffer from chakra exhaustion, and during the night it will deactivate, making your reserves refill, forcing your reserves to expand at an high rate. While you do that, you're going to be training in the following." He gave her a scroll. As she heard this, she and the others paled, making Rage say out loud, "Damn, not even I'm that sadistic." He said, "So let's get ready for hell, shall we?" She had to suppress a shiver when he said that with an innocent expression, which scared the hell out of her, making the empath and the emotoclones think, what fresh hell have I just stepped into? 2-month overview. During the last 2 months years, Naruto had put Raven through the proverbial shredder. When she isn't taking the allotted time to relax after training, she's practicing her Fuinjutsu and medical ninjutsu. With those seals he's put on her, her reserves had shot up from that of a mid-chunin to that of the three tails due to how Naruto had placed the seals. Her stamina and strength had skyrocketed from chunin to low umbu. Her chakra and demonic control had to his surprise followed to the height of the 3 and 4 tails respectively. When he had found out her yukai had gone up to the point he had wanted early, he had to adjust her training regimen for the next 2 years. But it's safe to say that Naruto hasn't been spending those 2 years just overseeing her training. Oh no, not at all. He's been training his new Dijutsu, which he decided to call the Transcendent Eye, and his demonic control. He still can't use all his tails, but he can use 8 tails for the rest of his till the time he dies. He's immortal, with no problem. He would mainly do this during the times Raven would sleep so he wouldn't bother her. But let's get back to the present. Hey Naruto-kun? The ash-gray-skinned beauty said, making him look over towards her. Over the 2 years they spent in the pocket dimension caused them to age a bit, making her go from 5 feet 7 inches to a solid 6 feet 0 inches, though she was still shorter than him by a good 3 inches. She wore black umbu-styled pants with a skin-tight red muscle shirt that showed her impressive C-cup under a black flak jacket. Something wrong, Raven-chan? The now 6 feet 3 inches youth asked as he subconsciously looked her over. He too had grown more in the looks department, gaining an impressive 8-pack. His muscles were packed tightly, giving him the physique of an Olympic swimmer or a runner. He, with the assistance of Raven, now made his hair go down to his upper back with his hair tied in numerous amounts of braids. His face more immaculate as his eyes were narrowed and defined. You seem to be fatigued. Is something wrong? She asked her boyfriend. For 6-7 months the two of them lost count of the months, since time flows differently in that dimension. He grimaced as he turned to see her scrutinizing eyes as he said, I don't know what you're talking about. She didn't believe him in the slightest and said, Right, and you sneaking out every night to train has nothing to do with it? He wondered how she knew when she answered, 'Cause I've been following you every night I wake up without in bed. How did she know what I'm thinking? Don't tell me she can dash. Yes, I can read your mind now. Answer the question. She countered, making him and the other emoticlones mentally freak out at her being able to read his mind. He sighed and said, Okay, so I've been trying to get my strength up to the point it was by the time the war started, but I can't hit that mark yet apparently, since my body hasn't completely adjusted to my age. I was at least 16 when I got to that point. Mentally I'm 26, physically 12. Meaning I got another 2 to 4 years physically to balance out my full power. As he looked her in the eye, he could see the look that held a scrutinizing gaze soften into a concerned stare, till she sighed and wrapped her arms around him, saying, You idiot, you can't force these things. You've got to let them flow naturally. If you're worried about that man, then don't worry. From what your mom told you, we've got another 8 years till I turn 18 to confront him, and by that time you and I will be strong enough to handle him. He sighed, knowing she was right, as his mother did tell him that they had 8 years to prepare, so there was no need to get bent out of shape. It was just that he couldn't stand the waiting. He knows Trigun's power has severely reduced thanks to Raven absorbing his demonic energy and making it her own. If he had to guess, Trigun's strength has become the equivalent of the 5 tails. Again he sighed as she held him in a protective embrace as they were leaning against a tree near their home. He said, Yeah, you're right, Ray. Aren't I always? She said, looking up at him with a loving smile, making him smile in return. He pulled her into a kiss, mumbling into the kiss, Cheeky minx, making her chuckle into the kiss. As they separated from the kiss, they returned to their comfortable position, enjoying the fresh breeze coming from the trees around them, causing a gentle breeze to assault them. Naruto could tell something was on her mind, so he asked, Is there something wrong, Ray? She shifted till her back was firmly pressed into his chest as his hand combed through her hair. She said simply, Thinking about the future is all. He raised an eyebrow and said, What about the future? I mean, we prepared to give the bastard the biggest ass kicking of his life. End aforementioned life. And everything ends groovy. She shifted till she was facing him with her legs at either side of his waist, bringing her face up close to his, and said, Okay, first off, groovy, did you seriously just say that? And secondly, that's what I'm talking about. What happens after that? I know you're going to have more than one mate, and I'm fine with that, but I can't help but feel something would be incomplete after the bout with Trigun. He thought her words over and found an honest truth to them. After Trigun has been dealt with, what then? Keep fighting evil? Save innocent lives? What about their future together, and with his possible other mates, what of them? He decided. We could always raise a family, you know. That made her sit straight up and stare him in the eye and ask, What do you mean? Smiling, he said, You know what I mean. After Trigon had been dealt with, you, me, and the others, once we find them, raise a family together, one big family. Kids and hell, a pet or two if you want, and the others want, so long as it isn't something ridiculous like a spider or anything related to the sea. I've had some bad experiences with those. I know I love you and will always love you. She started to cry at that point, knowing he loved her. Wrapping her arms around him, kiss again as he forced from the tree they were resting in and onto his back as she laid on top of him, kissing him. Once they separated, she asked, So how far along am I in these last 2 years of training, Naruto-kun? Instead of giving an answer, he just pulled out another scroll, which she promptly read. Rachel Ravenroth. Taijutsu, Mid-Umbumbu Captain, known styles Jukin, Snake Fist, Goken. Genjutsu, Low Umbu Mid-Umbu, capable of performing all CB rank Genjutsu without hand signs, on verge of doing the same with A rank. Ninjutsu, Low Sannin. Due to some inexplicable circumstance, she has gained the ability to use the following affinities: wind, fire, lightning, and darkness, and is slowly on the verge of creating her own sub-elements, knows several CA rank jutsu for each affinity. Kenjutsu, Low Sannin, capable of quickly disarming any weapon from the user. Known weapon preference: Twin Katana, Nodachi, Battle Fan. Medical Ninjutsu, on par with Tsunade in skill, has added the Chakra Scalpel and Elemental Ninjutsu to the Jukin and Snake Fist Taijutsu. Fuinjutsu, Uzumaki expert, quickly on the rise of becoming a seal mistress. She has also taken some of my own seals and expanded them beyond the level they were before. Stamina, on par with my own if not a little lower, aka she is a stamina freak, can go months on pure adrenaline alone, as we've tested to an extent, requires further tests to see true extent. Chakra reserves, on par with the 3 tails, quickly rising to the 4 tails. It is possible that by the time we face Trigon, she will have reserves as big as mine are now, due to my reserves consistently growing at a daily rate. Chakra control, same as reserves. Yukai, 4 tails in terms of power, and has awakened her true demon form but prefers to walk around with her original form before awakening. Her Yukai might by the end of these next 2 years could go beyond the 9 tails. Stay cautious with the mate mark, may cause unknown side effects. As Raven checked out the scroll, she couldn't help but be impressed about her results in herself. Though she couldn't help but raise a delicate eyebrow at that last remark, be cautious with the mate mark, may cause unknown side effects. She shrugged it off and decided to ask about it later when Naruto said, Now that these last 2 years have come to an end, we can have a week to relax, so do as you wish, love, since today is my turn to cook. Got anything in mind? She smiled as she nodded, saying, Stew with salad? He grinned and said, acting like a genie, Your wish is my command, my master. He bowed as he made his way back to the house. Raven's POV. God, did he have to say master? Me fighting off my heat alone for the last 2 years has been hard enough, even when he and I were just kissing. I'm hitting my breaking point here, damn it, and doing it myself after the first year hasn't helped me the same way. I sighed to myself watching him walk into the house. Just take him, damn it, do us all a favor, Rage remarked, looking through my eyes, which were glued to his swaying tails. While not as subtle, if you resist much longer you're going to go into a primal fury. You've been staving it off for the last 2 years, get it over with by tonight, or he's going to wind up in a compromising position, Knowledge said. Ugh, I know, damn it, every time I touch him I feel my control slip. I am afraid I could lose control before the night even begins, I said to myself. Then stop being a pussy and claim him as your first and fucking only, damn it. You don't make this any easier on us, you know, Rude shouts out, making me growl in frustration. I know, damn it, stop pestering me, I thought. Not till you make your claim on that hot piece of wolf tail, damn it, don't make one of us take over, damn it. All of us paused as the ever quiet and meek Timid actually yelled and cussed, now I know I gotta get laid. No shit, Sherlock, what was your first clue? Rude and Timid said in perfect unison, making Rage snort, saying, I like this new Timid, can we keep her? Sigh, fine, damn it, I'll do it tonight, anything I should know. Finally giving in to the pressure the girls kept on pushing on me. Just let go of your restraints and everything else will come naturally, alright? Happy said with a tone of concern in her overly chipper voice. I nodded and said fine, I will wait till tonight, and do it. Okay, will that make you all stop hounding me? That got me a resounding chorus of yes. Grown great, now I'm hungry, wonder if he's finished dinner yet. Ray, dinner's ready, come get washed up and eat while it's hot. Again, I love that man, doesn't mean he doesn't have his quirks, but that makes me love him all the more now to get cleaned up for dinner, and tonight snap 9 trees broken, damn it. Time skip after dinner. Raven POV. Naruto had turned in early and was sleeping peacefully, and is on his back wearing a loose black t-shirt and baggy gray sweatpants, defenseless. I slapped myself as I mentally assaulted myself. Snap out of it, you can't take advantage of him in his sleep, he'll never trust you again, I said to myself, and damn, I can hit hard. It hurts, guess that's the good side to his training, or as he calls it, his boot camp from hell. Just finish my shower and go to sleep. Grown WW, what is this feeling? My body feels like I'm burning alive. I force myself to the wall, still burning alive, feeling the illusionary seal fade away, revealing my true form, when a voice cut in and said, if you won't take our destined mate, then I will sit back and enjoy the ride. No, I said to myself, I can't force him to mate with me. He'll never see me the same way. A guy dash. The voice interjected again, saying, oh sweetie, then you don't have much faith or love for him then, do you? That numbed the pain I felt at the voice's words, making me shake in anger. Who the fuck you think you are, questioning my feelings for him? The voice replied in a smug tone, oh yeah, then why do you think he won't love you the same way ever again, or think he won't want to be around you anymore? Face it, you don't love him like you should. To you, he's just a means to stave off your heat. Tears pricked at my eyes, making me shake my head. No, that's not true, I do love him. I do. The voice continued, the only reason you keep Wolf Boy around is because he's the only one to treat you with such compassion as he does. When you find someone stronger than him, you'll drop him like last week's garbage. I shook my head even more and shouted, that's not true, damn it, I do love him. The voice paused at my shout, and for a few moments it remained silent till it reappeared, saying, then prove it, go in there and claim him as yours and the ones who are destined to share him with you. But make note that if you ever second guess yourself, I'll take control and leave you stuck in your head while I live the happy life we rightfully deserve after living in that hellhole of a home. I felt its presence fade into the back of my mind along with my form changing back to normal, but knew it was still there when I hear a knock on the door, making my heart stop. Hey Ray, you okay in there? I heard you scream. Are you okay? I could feel the worry and concern flow off him from behind the door, making my heart race. Bringing a feigned smile to my face, I simply said through the door, looking at the mirror, my violet eyes took a crimson glow with slits as my form started to change again after the seal reappeared. Regular POV outside the bathroom. Yeah, I'm fine, Naruto-kun, just wait for me on the bed, I'll be out in a moment, make sure you stay awake. He heard her say through the door, making him nod and say, unsure of the moment, as he replied, oh okay Ray, just don't take too long. He did as she said and sat at the edge of the bed with an Ika Paradise book, making him think at least there's some good that comes to reading these books, they stave off boredom, and since before Erosenin died he had me be a beta reader and fix the stories, making them be an equal balance of smut and actual story. Maybe I should resell these along with the old man's first story, make some money. He could still hear the shower run as he waited for another 15 minutes till it stopped, making his ear twitch at the change in sound while still focusing on the book when the bathroom door opened. The smell of jasmine and honey assaulted his senses. With his focus remaining on the book in his hands, he felt the damp pressure on his lap when a brick red hand with sharp nails grabbed his book, and another cupped his chin, making him looking into the ruby red eyes of a red-skinned angel. Lemon skipped. The two fell back into the bed, basking in the warmth the other gave as they laid under the sheets, with his angel resting on his chest as his tails wrapped themselves around them, creating a type of shield from the world. She did the same with her wings, creating a cocoon of fur and feathers. Raven looked up and said as her eyes radiated warmth and happiness, I love you, Narukoi. Kissing where she placed his mark, which was in the form of a black crescent moon, making him groan as he was still inside her, making him fum slightly, filling her, making her moan in satisfaction of being filled by her mate. Naruto brought her closer as he kissed her, massaging her mark, which was a violet moon. As she moaned, he said, I love you too, my dark angel, see you in the morning. The next morning. Man, talk about a wild night, she sure does go crazy when in heat. I like it, just wish she chilled out with the claws, back hurts like hell, Naruto thought as he started to wake up, feeling a slight pressure on his body. He looked down to see his mate laying on her side with her back towards him as they spooned. He smirked as he gently drew her closer and sucked the spot between her shoulder blade and the collarbone, getting a silent moan in appreciation, while he fondled her fleece from behind. He was too preoccupied to notice a spaded tail slithering its way up and around their waist, tying them together till she said, "After all that last night, and you're still eager? Naughty boy." He froze, knowing he was caught, so he said, "No, just relishing in the fact that I have an angel all for myself, though I think it would be good to get up with these marks. I don't know what might happen, so during training I gotta figure out what to expect." She sighed, not wanting to leave this position, but smirked as she turned till she was on top of him, looking him dead in the eye, and said, "Puliayasi, can we stay in bed for a little longer? I want to stay with my Wolfie-kun a little longer, he's so warm." He gave her a stern glare till she pulled the one card that makes any man crumble, the puppy eyes. He sighed and said, "Fine, 15 minutes, and then it's time for training K." She grinned, showing her sharp canines, thinking note to self, always use that as trump card when alone. She laid her head down on his chest, ear on his heart, listening to it beat rhythmically with the rise and fall of his chest as her hand traced the scar that looked like a puncture wound the size of a fist going through his chest. He smiled at the act, and brought his arms around her and hugged her close, both slowly drifting to sleep, content. Half-hour later. "I love feeling him against me like this," Raven thought as she felt him rake his hand through her long alabaster white hair, hearing the sounds of her emotions agree with her. Looking up, she sees him with his eyes closed and asks, "Naruto-kun, you awake?" He opened an eye slightly as he looked down with a smile, saying, "Yeah, I am. I'm just enjoying the peace. I'm just thinking about something." She propped herself up so she could look him dead in the eye, saying, "Thinking about what? You can tell me." He pulled himself up so he was leaning against the headboard. "Bring her to him." Collecting his thoughts, he said, "Well, I'm thinking about Trigon." She remained silent, wondering what he could mean, till he voiced the answer to her unspoken question. "I mean, with powerful entities or people, they have a group or cult of worshippers. What if someone is assisting in his reawakening?" She thought on that hypothesis, and quickly came to the conclusion someone could be speeding up the process. He looked down, and had seen the look of realization cross her face, making him speak. "I see you came up with the same answer I did. Someone out there on Earth is or are trying to speed it up, but with you absorbing his power, and from what I feel from the mark, at an accelerated rate, meaning it could take longer, from 8 years to maybe 10. He paused, collecting his thoughts. "But even if that's the case, they need to be stopped. Even if he gets out now, he would still be strong enough to take over the world, so we have to speed up your training, which means we're going to kick up your training and stay an additional year or 2 here." She could see the fact to his statement. She knows that even with all the training he's done for her, she still isn't at the strength necessary to stop him. Till a thought occurred to her. "In terms of tails, how many do he and I have now?" He thought about it, and felt her energy, and remained silent after a moment before saying, "Before you were at 4 tails and he was at 5, but now, after our marks have been placed, I would say you now have 6 tails worth and he would have 3. But you still lack the control over it, so you can only use 4 tails worth like before. So that means to maintain that control, I've got to up my training?" she said, summarizing his response, as she got a nod in agreement, as she paused before groaning. He asked, "What's wrong?" Worried for her safety, hoping nothing's wrong. Grunting, she said in a strained voice, "It feels like the base of my spine is on fire." The instant she said that, 5 black wolf tails sprouted out alongside her, one spaded tail growing fur over it, turning into a wolf tail, as well, all having a purple tip to them. Same for her head, when 2 black wolf ears with purple tips popped up on her head. Naruto saw these features and had to say, "Wow, Arya, you look stunning with your new features." To her credit, she had to blush at his declaration, but had to agree, seeing as she always liked his tails and ears. Now she has a set of her own, but still preferred the soft velour feel of his. She was about to speak when she felt him gently bite one of her ears and stroke the base of her tails, getting a satisfied moan from her, quivering ever so lightly, as she felt herself get hotter again, snapping her eyes open as they glowed, and growled as she got on top of him, saying, "You had to flip my switch, didn't you? And Naruto-kun?" He sighed and thought to himself, "And the others, I feel she's going to become sadistic or antagonistic alongside her stoic indifference by the time this is over." They nodded in agreement as they remained silent, with the only sounds filling the house were the sounds of love, lust, and desire, with their scents permeating the air in the room. Time skip mid-afternoon. Man, Arya, your stamina grew to almost match mine. I fear what should happen when you grow your other tails, he said as they walked out of the shower from their fourth round together of the day. She walked out huffing as she unsteadily walked out of the room, looking up at him, still having her fucked silly look on her face, making him smirk, his eyes filled with mirth. As she seen that look, she could only smirk, as she regained her balance, making her way towards the dresser that held her panties and bras, swaying her hips with her tails enhanced those motions, making him growl lustfully when she looked over her shoulder lovingly, getting a small smile from her. While they were changing, he heard her groan in disapproval, causing him to turn at an interesting sight. Raven messing with her pants due to her tails, preventing her from pulling them up all the way, unlike when she had her original tail, making him snort, saying, "Ray, you know you can just use your yukai to dismiss the tails and bring them out when you want to, right?" She huffed indignantly as she muttered, "I knew that," making him chuckle at her as he patted her on the head as he smiled at her pout. Once she made her tails vanish from view, the two occupants went downstairs as Naruto cooked lunch, a small salad and fish with rice. Once they were finished, she spoke. "So Naruto-kun, now that we're staying for another year or two, I just remembered we both been together for about a year in the actual world, haven't we?" He paused in mid-bite thinking and said, "To be truthful, being in here threw off my sense of time by a large margin. In here it's been 2 years, but outside it's been 2 months. The month before we started dating, and that was at the beginning of the year, so we've been together since February or March." She tried to think on it, and just shrugged, knowing that it didn't matter, the two of them loved each other, and that's what mattered. Reaching for a seal she placed on the inside of her wrist, she summoned a book that read how to make sentient weapons and items. As he ate, he remembered Raven always reading that book whenever they're either eating or relaxing, so he decided to ask, "Hey RA, why are you so interested in that book? Planning on making something?" She pulled the book from in front of her nose, reminding him of when Kakashi was interrupted from reading his porn, when she answered, "I had a few ideas and wanted to read and test them out, so I'm going over the finer points. Also, doesn't this place have a forge?" He paused and nodded, saying, "Yeah, it's in the basement. You just gotta be careful when it comes to making those types of weapons. It has to be precise." She nodded and devoured her lunch and started to make her way downstairs when she turned and said, "When are we gonna be starting the next couple of years of training?" He paused and thought it over. "She's worked her ass off with my training regimen, and it's gonna take some time. She's earned a couple weeks off to relax so long as she does some light training. We start our next training in 2 weeks, so that's half a year in here to relax." She nodded, giving him a chaste kiss before returning downstairs, leaving him clueless of her reasons to use the forge. Raven POV. Let's see, it says to make sentient weapons you must infuse a supernatural element into the item, or items you're making. An example would be for Samahita, the shark-skin sword Naruto showed me when he was putting the swords in the armory. From what he's told me on it, it was made the way it was because it was made from the skin of a demon shark that when it grazed against its target it was able to absorb their energy, and in some cases if it took too much their life energy. I thought to the others. Knowledge said, "Indeed, but from what you're trying to make several weapons for him, it will need your blood and our energies to make them each separately." I nodded mentally and saw the forge in front of me. It wasn't anything overly large, just big enough to do multiple projects on, which was what I was hoping for. Rage spoke up, "But what weapons will each of us infuse our energies in? I mean, he uses so many weapons, and that necklace of his from his godmother who treated him like a little brother or son. Wish we could have met her. She sound like a badass bitch to be around." Everyone nodded, remembering the tales he told us about the people he cared about. The ones who made the biggest impact on him were his mother/sister figure Tsunade Senju and Shizen, older brother figure Irika, grandfather figures Sarutobi Hiruzen and Tuchi Ichiraku, and his daughter who was a sister to him, I am Ichiraku, and his few friends. Timid said sadly that was the first time he cried when he talked about them. All the others grew somber, remembering him crying so much. Pushing that aside, I sat by the forge and continued reading. Got to think, what weapons does he use the most? He uses a katana, okatana, no dachi, he dabbles in the battle fan, and can use twin guns. I guess we can make them when we use our essences. We can infuse them accordingly, but who gets their energy placed in them? We spent the first half hour debating and drawing up the designs for the weapons when I thought, what about clothing or an accessory? Once everyone agreed to the designs to them, I made several shadow clones and had my emotions focus on them to posses them, letting us get to work knowing that he's gonna need something that won't get damaged. Upstairs, Naruto POV. Clang clang asterisk asterisk clang asterisk. Man, whatever Ri's working on down there, she must be dead set on them. Wonder what she's making. You can only wait and see, my friend Knowledge said to me, making me agree, knowing that whatever she's making is worth the wait no matter how long it takes. Alright, time to get these next 6 years of training planned out over these next few weeks. My piece being said, I grabbed some scrolls and planned out her training for her regimen from hell. Time skip 2 weeks later. Over the last 2 weeks later, the routine had been set for the past 2 weeks: eat, light training, breakfast, work on training regimen, down in the forge followed by various clangs, and eat dinner then sleep. Repeat the cycle. Naruto had finished her training regimen, and was waiting for her to wake up while he relaxed downstairs nursing a cup of coffee. "Ha, good morning, Naruto-kun," Raven said as she walked down the stairs in her standard PJs, loose oversized t-shirt, and her underwear this time in a velvet red color. Amused, he watches her fumble around the kitchen, the clanging sounds still reverberating through the air downstairs with muffled strings of profanity abound. He looks at her as she sets her fresh cup of tea down on the table, nursing it much like he was when he said, "I still can't understand how you can sleep through that. I mean, I've slept through explosion no problem, but that has to hurt your ears since you're still adjusting." She shook her head and said, "I've gotten used to it, to be honest." Looking over the scroll, she said as a matter of fact instead of a question, "I take it that's my next few years' training regimen?" He nodded, rolling it to her as she picked it up with her magic, making it levitate in a black aura. Rachel, Raven, Roth training regimen. Year 1, Year 2. Taijutsu. Increase gravity and resistance seals by several levels from 20 to 30 to increase strength from ANBU captain to low Sannin, and teach her to add the chakra scalpel and Tsunade's super strength to her styles. Kenjutsu. With use of seals, increase strength and reflexes to fully use the sword styles she knows, Hiten Mitsurugi Ryu, and add elemental manipulation to her Kenjutsu, and make her go from low Umbu to low Sannin. Ninjutsu. Teach her to make new jutsu and advance the ones she knows to a more powerful form, and make demonic techniques to use, making her go from high Umbu to medium Sannin. Chakra control and Yukai control. Get her control from the 4 and 5 tails respectively to 6 and 8 tails in both control. Genjutsu. Much like in ninjutsu, teach her how to make genjutsu of her own and through the use of her yukai to make more effective and dangerous. Medical ninjutsu. She's long since improved in medicine and through practice can perform drastic surgeries in record time, and is improving the use of creating poisons and of various kinds and add those to her thrown weapons. Fuinjutsu. She has long since passed the seal master test that was made by my mother, father, and godfather with a few improvements on my part, and is on the rise of creating better barrier jutsu than most Uzumaki. Year 3, Year 4. Spend last 2 years in the training ground before leaving to work on whatever she wishes, and the history on Earth to be up to date on the events that has happened there, and their advancements to be able to integrate herself into society. As Raven read the scroll, she had to smile in anticipation and at the prospect of learning about Earth, and what has been going on since the last she knew of the happenings of Earth was from the Limited. And what information the monks had went back to as far as the segregation of African Americans. It would be good to know more about Earth and their laws. Eager to start her training, she said, oozing with excitement, "When we starting? I can't wait to get started." Chuckling, he brought out more training gear and historical textbooks from Earth, making her ask, "Where did you get those books from, Naruto-kun?" "I had a few shadow clones go through a portal I made in the house to go get the supplies while you were hell-bent in the forge, so I got the stuff we needed to learn from Earth," he said nonchalantly. She couldn't even express herself at the moment due to the fact his face had an innocent expression, and she didn't even know about the portal but decided to just keep quiet, knowing he was serious. Grabbing a couple dozen history books and other books on technology, machines, and advancements in the world, and had her clones read them at their own pace. Turning towards her love but began to pale seeing his sadistic grin, and asked quite fearfully, "And then, Naruto, what are we doing for training?" Still grinning, he said, "Well, for training, your gravity and resistance seals are going to be increased again from 20 to 30, and for your weapons we are adding gravity seals to those as well." Raven paled further, thinking in despair, "I'm gonna die." The only thing that her clones did were nod in agreement with her statement, further increasing her fears much to Naruto's enjoyment. As much as I enjoy seeing you scare yourself into thinking you are going to die, I think it's time we got started, right? He said, amused with the current situation. She could only cry with her last thoughts before the 4 years of training commenced. He's trying to kill me before I fight my father. Chapter end. Watch all the uncensored lemons/parts of this story on my Patreon. Link is in the description.
Now watch daily exclusive uncensored lemon stories and mature content, along with NSFW images, featuring harem girls characters from the fics. Access all this and more on my Patreon. Click the link in the description to explore.